Hey everyone, welcome to CloudLabs Learner Guide for DP203 Data Engineering on Microsoft Azure. In this short video, we are going to take a look at how you can use CloudLabs Hands-on Lab environment for completing the lab exercises for DP203. The DP203 course lab provided by CloudLabs are divided into 17 modules. These 17 modules are as per Microsoft's official curriculum. Typically, these 17 modules are completed in 4 days. However, your course may have a different schedule. If that is the case, your instructor would notify you about the actual schedule for your training. You will be using 5 different lab environments for completing these 17 modules. So one lab environment may be used to complete one or more modules. And during your course, you will be switching back and forth between the modules, between the lab environments to complete the required lab scenarios. All 5 lab environments are running on production Azure subscriptions, mostly deploying costly resources such as Azure Synapse Analytics. So you do not need to bring any Azure trial or Azure Pass accounts. You will be using pre-configured Azure accounts with required pre-built Azure infrastructure for your hands-on labs requirement. While the labs are typically available for 4 days, the uptime of resources, which is basically the time that you can keep your VMs, keep your SQL pools running, is limited as per the required time for completing 203 lab environment. Now I'm gonna take you to a quick demonstration, where we are going to take a look at how you can get access to the lab environment and how you should use the lab environment throughout your course. In order to access the lab environment, you need a sign up link and an activation code. Typically, your instructor would provide this information prior to the hands-on lab time. So let me open up a browser instance and I'm gonna sign up for a lab environment. So I will put my name. You will be receiving an activation code or a voucher code. Please do use that to activate your lab environment. As soon as you click on submit, you will get an option to launch the required lab environments. As you remember, you are provided 5 different environments, and in each environment, you can see one or more modules that you can launch. So typically, you will start with environment 1 to complete the module 1, and then you will come back on environment 2 to complete the module 2. Please consult with your instructor before launching the environments to make sure that you are following your training schedule and pattern. I'm going to start with the environment 1 at the moment. So as soon as I click on it, it will open up the environment 1 launch page for me. As soon as I click on launch page, it will assign me a DP203 lab environment 1. Right now, I have the access immediately, and as soon as I launch the lab environment, I can see that the timer has started. So I'm already logged in here and I can get started with the lab environment. You should allow the clipboard access in your browser so that you are able to copy and paste information from your machine between the lab. The lab environment includes a Jump virtual machine with required tools. As you can see, Data Studio, SQL Management Studio, Power BI Desktop, Visual Studio Code, etc. On the other side, you can see the lab guide, which includes the detailed instructions for you to complete the lab. So as long as you follow these instructions carefully, your lab should be good. You can navigate back and forth between the modules as needed. The environment details tab include the username and password, which you will use to log into Azure. So please make sure you do not use your personal username password for Azure and be sure to use only this particular username password. Under the resource group, you will be able to see the provision resources. So for example, in this particular environment, there's a Databricks cluster which is pre-created for you. So you can use this particular Databricks workspace URL and credentials to access the lab environment. The lab RG includes your virtual machine, SQL credentials. So all the username passwords will be available in the environment details tab. The virtual machines tab will show you the virtual machines listed over here, and you will be able to start, restart, stop the virtual machines when you are not using the lab. You can use the help section to look at some of the common issues, such as if you're not able to copy paste, etc. So this is an example of lab environment. So typically, I would do module one. I will complete the exercise using the guidance. And once I'm done, I will stop the virtual machine and I will come back to my lab cluster page. Please bookmark this URL and I will launch the module two. It's giving me a notification that I already have one of the other environment active, which is okay. So I can say, yeah, please give me the next environment. So on the other side, while the VM is stopping, you can see that the jump VM has disconnected. So next time when you need to use this particular environment, please come back here, start this virtual machine, and you will be able to continue from there. Starting, stopping virtual machines or pausing, resuming the SQL pool does not impact your lab progress. So feel free to start, stop, pause, resume as many times as needed. So right now I'm in the environment two, and in the environment two, same process. We have the lab guide, we have username, password available depending on what is needed for the lab, the virtual machines available. So I can follow this particular lab guide to complete the module two. So at any point of time, I can switch between modules by coming to my cluster page and navigating between the lab environments. Few things which are important is to be able to, every time you are done with the lab environment, stop the virtual machines and also stop the SQL pool. So instructions to stop the SQL pool are available in your learner guide as well as in your lab instructions, where you will go to Synapse Analytics Studio, and under Manage, you will be able to pause the pool. Once you are done with lab environments, you can notify the instructor and they can help with deletion, or the environments will be automatically deleted once the duration is over. Let me take you to the learner guide real quick. Please bookmark the URL so that you can take a look at it prior to the workshop. So getting access to the lab environment, we looked at it already. The lab environment and module mapping, you can see from here as well. Please make a note of this important information about the uptime limits. So each environment is having specific duration. For example, environment one is having 96 hours duration because it may be used for all 4 days. Whereas the uptime is the amount of duration you can keep the VMs or SQL pool running. So please make sure you understand this uptime limit and you keep an eye on your uptime limits to make sure that you are completing the entire lab environments within the defined limits. Using the DP203 lab environments, for each of the modules, there are recommended action which you should follow after completing the module. For example, after doing modules 1, you should stop the VM. After doing module 5, you should stop the VM and pause the Synapse pool. As long as you follow these learner actions after each module, you should be good with respect to uptimes limits. The instructions to stop VMs, pause pool are available in your learner's guide as well. A lot of time we get requests where learners want to look at the lab guide before really launching their environment, because as soon as they launch the environment, their timer gets started. Please do use these links to preview the lab guides without starting your timer. So these links will give you an idea about the lab without you really launching your environment. So typically, learners use this to become familiar with the guide itself, they become familiar with the content, and once they are ready to complete the lab, they go and launch their environment from their registration page. So use these lab guide links to get familiar with the lab environments. So that is all from a demo perspective, and just a quick recap. You will be able to access your environment from the link and code provided by your instructors. Please use the learner's guide, and please do use Cloud Labs portal to stop and resume the VMs, and Azure portal to pause and resume the SQL pool. Make a note of this URL, and all the information will be available over there. If you have any questions or any concerns, issues during your lab environment, please contact your instructor, and your instructor, if needed, will involve the Cloud Labs backend support team for any of the environment related issues. Some of the best practices: please do stop or pause the resources when they are not in use. This will make sure you do not run out of the time limits. Bookmark your personalized lab URL. So as soon as you sign up, you will receive an email which will include your lab URL. However, if you miss this URL, you can also contact your instructor to provide you another URL or send you another invite email. Please do use the lab guide preview links to get familiar with the lab instructions without really launching your environments.